I walked into my living room, still wearing my black funeral dress, and found Richard Wilson, my father-in-law, standing by the brick fireplace. Andrew, one of my late husband Daniel's brothers, had one hand on the mahogany cabinet. Thomas, Daniel's youngest brother, held a cardboard box already packed with my late husband's veterinary awards. Richard said, "That player came from my father. It goes back to the family." I realized they had rehearsed this scene without me. Richard smiled like a director calling action. "My name is Clara Wilson. I live in Columbus, Ohio. Until last week, I was married to Daniel Wilson, a gentle veterinarian who built our small animal clinic from nothing. Now I stand here as his widow, defending the life we created together." If you want to hear how the written word can beat blood money and bad intentions, hit subscribe. Stay until the end because there is a letter that changes everything. I woke up at 6 a.m. the day after we buried Daniel. The house still smelled like the lilies from the funeral reception. I made coffee in the kitchen that overlooked the clinic parking lot. We had renovated this corner building together, turning the ground floor into exam rooms and the upper floor into our home. Every brick and beam told a story about the life we built. Richard's truck pulled into the lot at 7:30. Helen, my mother-in-law, sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded. Andrew and Thomas, Daniel's brothers, followed in a second vehicle. I watched them through the window as they climbed the exterior stairs to the residence entrance. I did not unlock the door. Richard knocked twice, then used a key I had never seen him carry. They walked in without waiting for permission. Richard scanned the living room like an appraiser. Helen, my mother-in-law, moved toward the kitchen and straightened a frame on the wall. Andrew opened the coat closet and peered inside. Thomas pulled out his phone and started taking photos of the furniture. Richard said, "Clara, we need to discuss the property." I asked, "What property?" He gestured broadly. "This building, the clinic, the equipment. It was always meant to stay in the Wilson family." Helen poured herself water from my filter pitcher. She said, "We understand you are grieving, dear, but there are practical matters. Daniel would want his family to protect what he built." Andrew leaned against the kitchen counter. He said, "We will need to change the locks." "For security?" I felt my stomach drop. I murmured, "This is my home." Richard said, "This is Wilson family real estate. You have been here 8 years. That does not make it yours." I kept my face calm. I moved to the table and sat down, sliding my phone into my lap under the edge. I asked, "What exactly are you planning?" Thomas finally spoke. He said, "We are taking inventory. Dad has the paperwork." I looked at Richard. I said, "What paperwork?" He waved a hand. "The deed, the business documents. Daniel never transferred anything out of the family trust." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. I said, "I would like to see those documents." Richard said, "You will see them when the time is right." Helen touched my shoulder as she passed. She said, "You should think about where you will go, perhaps back to your sister in Clintonville. You two were always close." I watched them move through my home. Andrew opened drawers. Thomas measured the doorways. I noticed a folder on the side table near Richard. The folder tab read Wilson Estate Plan. The paper was still warm. Fresh ink never proves history, it only proves intention. 8 years earlier, Daniel brought me to his parents' house for Sunday dinner. 2 months after we met, Helen seated me at the far end of the table, 3 chairs away from Daniel, next to a cousin I had never met. Richard carved the roast at the head and spoke to his sons about property values. When I mentioned my work at the hospital, Helen smiled and changed the subject to the church fundraiser. After dinner, Richard pulled Daniel into the study. I heard raised voices through the door. When they came out, Daniel's jaw was tight. He drove me home in silence. Finally, he said, "My father wants me to ask you to sign a prenuptial agreement." I asked, "Do you want me to sign one?" He said, "I want you to marry me. The paper does not matter. We married without the prenup." Richard did not speak to Daniel for 2 months. At the wedding, Helen introduced me to distant relatives as Daniel's wife, pausing just long enough before the word wife to let everyone hear the asterisk. Andrew told a toast story about how Daniel once promised to keep the clinic in the family no matter what. The room laughed. I smiled and gripped Daniel's hand under the table. Years passed with small cuts. Helen reorganized my kitchen when she visited, moving my dishes to higher shelves. Richard invited Daniel to family business meetings and told me they were for blood relatives only. At Thanksgiving, Andrew asked when we were planning to have children, then added, "That would finally make you one of us." But one comment stuck with me. At Daniel's 40th birthday party, Richard stood in the clinic lobby, surrounded by his sons, and said, "This place will outlast all of us. It stays in the family. That is the Wilson way." He looked directly at me when he said it. At the time, I thought it was just pride. Now it sounded like a threat. 15 months before Daniel died, I went to the clinic on a Saturday to finish payroll. The building was supposed to be empty. I heard voices from the break room as I passed. I recognized Andrew and Thomas. I stopped in the hallway. Andrew said, "The record player is worth at least $2,000, and those surgical lights in the or are top of the line." Thomas said, "The real value is the property. Corner lot, this close to downtown, it is probably worth $700. Maybe more." Andrew said, "We will need to move fast. She will fight, but she does not have a claim. Dad says the deed has protections." Thomas said, "What about the will?" Andrew laughed. "What will?" Daniel never made one. Everything defaults to blood. I stepped backwards silently and walked to my car. I sat in the parking lot and texted Daniel. I wrote, "Call me when you can. We need to talk about your family." He called 10 minutes later. I told him everything. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I've been worried about this. Meet me at home. I need to tell you what I have been doing." That night, Daniel sat me down at the kitchen table. He said, "I know how my family thinks. I have been preparing." I whispered, "Preparing what?" He said, "Legal protections, documents. I met with an attorney 3 months ago." I asked, "Why did you not tell me?" He said, "Because I wanted everything finalized first. I did not want to scare you." He explained that he was updating his will. He was changing how the property was titled. He was making sure that no matter what, his family believed, I would be protected. I said, "Will it be enough?" He squeezed my hand. Daniel said, "I put it in writing where my father respects at least, at the county." 4 months later, Daniel came home from his own doctor appointment with a gray face. He said, "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It is already in the liver." The room tilted. The lilies from the reception turned from sweet to metallic. I whispered, "What are our options?" He said, "Not many. Maybe 6 months, maybe less." We spent 1 week crying. Then Daniel made a list. At the top he wrote, "Protect Clara." We met attorney Michael Grant in his office on High Street. Michael was in his mid-50s with wire glasses and a methodical way of speaking. Daniel said, "I need to make sure my wife keeps everything. The house, the clinic, all of it. My family will try to take it." Michael nodded. He said, "We will create multiple layers of protection." He explained joint tenancy with right of survivorship for the real estate. The property would pass directly to me outside of probate. He drafted a will that left all assets to me and included a no contest clause. Anyone who challenged it would be disinherited entirely. He updated beneficiary designations on every account. Daniel signed each document slowly. Michael said, "I will file the deed changes with Franklin County. I will keep certified copies in my safe. When the time comes, these papers will speak for you." At the end of the meeting, Daniel asked for privacy. Michael stepped out. Daniel pulled a yellow legal pad from his bag and started writing by hand. I asked, "What is that?" He said, "A letter. For you. For them. For the moment when they try exactly what we know they will try." He wrote for 20 minutes, crossing out lines and rewriting. When he finished, he folded the pages and put them in an envelope. He wrote my name on the front. He said, "Michael will keep this. He will know when to give it to you." As we left the office, Daniel stopped me on the sidewalk. He said, "Trust the folder in Michael's safe more than any promise my father ever made." I sat at my kitchen table while Richard made phone calls in my living room. It was 10 a.m. 3 days after the funeral. He was calling a locksmith. I heard him say, "Today, yes, I need the full building. All exterior doors and the interior office." Thomas walked through each room with a tablet, taking notes. Andrew opened the coat closet and started pulling out Daniel's jackets. Helen stood near my bedroom door, glancing inside. I picked up my phone and walked toward the bathroom. I murmured, "Excuse me for a moment." No one looked up. I locked the bathroom door and called Michael Grant. He answered on the second ring. I said, "They are here. They are calling a locksmith. They are going through everything." Michael said, "Stay calm. Do not sign anything. Do not hand over any keys. Let them keep talking." I asked, "How long?" He said, "Let them dig the hole deeper. I will be there in 20 minutes. If they ask where you are, tell them you are not feeling well. Stay in that bathroom until I pull into the lot. Record audio if they threaten you. Say nothing else." I sat on the edge of the bathtub. I could hear furniture scraping across the floor. Someone opened and closed cabinet doors. Andrew called out, "Or does she keep the file boxes?" I looked at my watch. 20 minutes felt like hours. Andrew said, "Locksmith is 15 out." Michael texted, 10 away. Michael's silver sedan pulled into the clinic parking lot at 10:35. I came out of the bathroom. Richard glanced up from his phone. He said, "Feeling better?" I replied. My attorney is here. Richard's face hardened. He said, Your attorney? Michael knocked once and entered. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather briefcase. He said, Good morning. I am Michael Grant. I represent the estate of Daniel Wilson and Clara Wilson. Richard stood. He said, We are handling family business. You can leave. Michael set his briefcase on the dining table and opened it. He said, You are attempting to take possession of property you do not own. That is not family business. That is theft. He pulled out a folder with tabs. He said, This is a certified copy of the deed to this property, recorded with the Franklin County Recorder on March 18th of last year. The property is held in joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Upon Daniel Wilson's death, full ownership transferred automatically to Clara Wilson. No probate, no family claim. Richard said, That building was bought with Wilson money. Michael said, It was purchased by Daniel Wilson during his marriage to Clara Wilson. It is marital property, and as of March 18th, it is Clara's property. He pulled out another document. He said, This is Daniel Wilson's last will and testament, executed April 2nd of last year. It leaves all assets to Clara Wilson. It includes a no contest clause. Any beneficiary who challenges this will forfeit any inheritance entirely. Andrew stepped forward. He said, We're his blood family. She has been here 8 years. Michael said, She is his widow. She is the sole owner of this property. You are trespassing? Thomas pointed at the boxes they had packed. He said, We have a right to family heirlooms. Michael said, You have no rights here. Clara Wilson owns this residence and its contents. Removing property without her permission could constitute theft and unlawful lock changes under Ohio law. Richard's voice rose. He said, I built this family. I put the money together for Daniel to start that clinic. Blood matters. Michael said, The deed matters. The will matters. Recorded county documents matter. Their feelings do not. Helen moved toward a box near the sofa. Inside, I saw the corner of my mother's quilt, the one she stitched the year before she died. Helen's fingers brushed the quilt stitching. Michael said, One more document. Michael pulled an envelope from the briefcase. My name was written on the front in Daniel's handwriting. Michael said, Daniel asked me to read this aloud in the presence of his family if there was any attempt to remove Clara from this property. The room went silent. Michael opened the envelope and unfolded 2 pages of yellow legal paper. He read, To my family, you are hearing this because you did exactly what I knew you would do. You waited until I was gone and then you tried to take everything from Clara. I watched you exclude her for 8 years. I heard the comments. I saw the seating arrangements. I listened to Andrew and Thomas plan which pieces of my life they would claim. I knew you believed she was temporary. So I made sure she was permanent. The house is hers, the clinic is hers. Every account, every asset, every piece of property. I recorded the deeds. I signed the will. I updated every beneficiary form. This is not a mistake. This is a choice. Clara was my partner. She worked beside me. She loved me when you saw me as a family asset. If you are hearing this, it means you proved me right. And it means you have lost. Michael stopped reading. No one moved. Helen's face was pale. Richard stared at the floor. Andrew and Thomas looked at each other. I said, Put everything back where you found it. Thomas hesitated. Andrew looked at his father. Richard said nothing. I repeated, Put it back. Now, they carried the boxes back inside. They returned the record player to its place by the fireplace. Andrew hung Daniel's jackets back in the closet. Helen set down the vase she had wrapped in newspaper. When everything was back, I held out my hand. I said, The key? Richard reached into his pocket and dropped a brass key into my palm. I asked, Where did you get this? He said, Daniel gave it to me years ago. I answered, It does not work here anymore. Over the next 2 weeks, word spread. Helen's friends at church heard a version of the story. Neighbors asked questions. The Veterinary Association sent a formal letter recognizing me as the clinic owner. Richard and Helen stopped attending their regular social events. Andrew's wife filed for separation, citing embarrassment over the estate conflict. Thomas closed his social media accounts. As they walked toward the door, Richard turned back. Richard said, Blood does not sign away. Michael said, It already did. I stood in the clinic lobby at 6 p.m. on a Friday, 2 months after Michael read Daniel's letter. The setting sun came through the west windows and turned the brick wall orange. The last appointment had checked out. The vet techs and the receptionist were closing their stations. Jenna, the lead tech, stopped at the desk. She said, We heard the rumors about the family, about what they tried to do. I replied, It is handled. She said, We are glad you are still here. This place would not be the same without you. I locked the front door after everyone left. I walked upstairs to the residence. I had changed the lock code on the exterior door the day after Michael's visit. I was the only person with the combination. I set my bag on the kitchen counter and walked through the rooms Daniel and I had shared. I moved the record player back to the spot where Daniel liked it, near the window where the afternoon light hit the wood. I unfolded my mother's quilt and draped it over the back of the sofa, the stitching visible, a pattern of blue and gold squares arranged the way she had taught me. I sat down with the envelope Michael had returned to me. I pulled out Daniel's letter and read past the part Michael had shared with the family. The last paragraph was meant only for me. Clara, I am sorry I will not be there to see you stand your ground, but I know you will. You are stronger than they ever understood. This home, this clinic, this life we built is yours not because of paperwork but because you earned it every single day. Do not let anyone make you small. I love you. Build something good here. You were never temporary. You were always the future. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I sat in the quiet house and listened to the sounds of the building settling. The clinic downstairs was mine. The home was mine. The life Daniel and I built was mine. I did not take it from them. They tried to take it from me. And the paper Daniel prepared, the words he wrote, the future he planned protected what was already mine. This was not revenge. This was justice drawn in ink and recorded in county files. Daniel built it so I could stand exactly where I was standing. Justice was not a feeling. It was a filing. I locked the door and let the building exhale. Thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments what moment made you angriest. Was it the locksmith call the box with the quilt, or something else? Have you seen families treat in-laws like temporary additions instead of real family? And do you want to hear about what Clara decides to do with the clinic next? Share your stories, keep it respectful, and tell me, has anyone in your life ever left you a letter that changed everything? I want to hear what you have lived through.